Well, on the Finance Administration Committee. Meeting in person. Any public members anywhere?
No, we have no public attendees. We have just a member of staff attending remotely.
Okay. Okay, we'll continue with that, start with that action item. Adoption of the minutes. Pretty short meeting and pretty short set of minutes. Any comments from the committee members on the minutes?
Chairman, is your mic on? Chairman. Thank you.
Is my mic on? No. Yes, now. Okay, next question. Again.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. What, 3 to, anyway. Second item is the treasurer's report for August 2024. Is there
Yes, good evening.
more report? Yes.
Good evening, chair, members of the committee. I will be going over that treasurer's report and see if I can share my screen. Right, okay. So we started the month of August with 28.8 million in cash and investments and ended the month with 28.2 million. We had fee deposits of about 1.18 million. These are mostly user fees, capacity fees, and permit fees. There's a little bit of project reimbursements there. And then we had cash disbursements of about 1.88 million, which includes about 27,000 in rebate payments. And a detailed listing of those check payments is in Exhibit B of the report. And here I would like to just highlight that in Exhibit B, you will see a few negative payments. These are void checks. I think it's on page 9 and page 13. And these void checks are checks that haven't been encashed by previous, customers, either rebate customers. So these checks belong to I think they belong from 2013 through 2021. So these weren't encashed, and we are going through a cleanup exercise where we're actually calling these folks and saying, hey, you have a check that belongs to you that hasn't been encashed. So that's why you see those checks. We void those checks and then reissue those checks to them. So we are actively calling these customers, and that's why you see those negative payments showing up in Exhibit B.
Which are canceled checks.
These are canceled checks.
Oh, that's very, very conscientious. Are you getting some people to cash the?
Most of them, yes. When we bring it to their attention, they were like, "Oh, yes, you're right," and so yes, they are. They're feeling very positive that the district is calling them and giving them the checks that they.
Just put it this way, your CFO is more conscientious than your GM.
Yeah, but because that's the next question. If people don't cash their checks on time, and what do we have, a 6 month or do we have a year for them to do it? What happens?
Yes, so that's why it stays on our books as an outstanding credit, and it keeps getting carried forward at every bank reconciliation. So every month we do a bank recon, and those stack of checks shows up as stale checks, and we keep carrying those. And at some point we need to look at our, checks and say, hey, these are unclaimed cash and credits, and we need to follow the government code requirement. And so one of them is, hey, either we call these people, and if we aren't able to do that, we publish a list of these checks on a newspaper that's widely circulated in the county, which we did. And then after we meet that requirement and no one calls, then then we follow the procedure to take those monies. And since this is a district, we might have to return this to the state, and that would be, but we haven't reached there because all the folks that we reached out, they said, yes, please send the check to us. So we
Okay,
aren't there.
Okay.
So that's Exhibit B. And then Exhibit C is just a statement of our revenues and expenditures for the month of August. We are keeping track with what we expect at this time of the year. So nothing unusual there. And that's the treasurer's report.
I have one
Yes.
question. I should have asked this question a long time ago, but how is it that we pay the tax payments to the IRS?
We-
Public entity, why is that?
It's called the payroll tax, not the other tax. So every employer should be paying payroll tax, and that's what those payments are. When we run the employee payroll and then the board payroll, we need to collect our payroll taxes,
Is
and
that
so you'll have,
Social Security?
there is Medicare,
Medic-
there is federal, and I have a detail of the breakdown, but it's just what we need to pay them. Social Security is only for board members, not for regular employees, because we are CalPERS, and we don't, regular employees don't pay Social Security,
They don't?
not
Correct.
district employees.
Only
There-
Medicare.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's like the federal, there's some of the federal employees when I was in the federal system were not under Social Security.
Yeah, and it
Yes.
varies public agency to public agency. And so we've had some who, came in from the private sector and don't have enough quarters built up. And it's kind of tough because they could be here and retire and need like 9 more federal quarters, but we never paid Social Security in for them. So
Oh, okay. So it's just Medicare, maybe some other payroll. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I have a breakdown of
Thank you.
that. There are three
I
pieces to
was
it.
just wondering what the story was there.
we used to, from time to time, pay the IRS for any arbitrage on the bonds. It's a 5-year calculation, but we paid everything off in July of 2022. So, so that's fine.
Okay, well, didn't want to.
Yeah, that depends on our contract with CalPERS. Some public jurisdictions like the city and county of San Francisco, those employees pay Social Security taxes. Other public jurisdictions like us and smaller cities don't. So because we have a pension and
So in the arrangement that we have with that means that the employees rely on the pension more because they don't have Social Security, at least not from this.
Correct.
Okay.
right, yes.
And then if you have both, then there's a windfall tax on your Social Security.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I think they were trying to get rid of that.
There-
For-
This last, yeah.
For the federal
Congress.
employees, they was trying to get rid of it. So
You mean the supplemental tax on it?
That windfall
the
provision.
windfall, they trying to get rid, because
Oh.
federal employees couldn't collect Social Security. So they got rid of, it was a bill that supposed to went through with this last.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
it's made its way to joint committee yet, but it's
Okay.
out, yeah, it was in this last session of
Yeah,
Congress.
it's supposed to be.
But it didn't get through.
I don't think, not yet.
Oh,
I mean, we don't even have an appropriation bill. We haven't had a
Yeah.
budget.
It was with that, so.
okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the whole meeting for that, but thank you.
No, it's clarification. That's good to know. I'm going to go back, Michelle, to the list of uncashed checks.
Mhm.
You had 2 pages you mentioned. Was the other page 13, number 9 and? page-
13, yeah. So the difference between the two is page 13 includes rebate customers, and page 9 is non-rebate, like the tree service or
Mhm.
others here. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask a question about the rebate. Rebates are initiated by the very customer, right? They're not, I mean, it's personal.
Yes.
It's not a corporation or something like that. It's not a business.
Yeah,
And I'm just wondering why they would not cash a check. I just.
that's very interesting, right? Because this is a accumulation of checks over several years. Maybe they left and maybe they were renters and they left. There could be a number of reasons. It's hard to predict why they wouldn't have encashed their checks. It's not a long listing if you look at it, because this is.
No, I
so
see
many
there's
years.
maybe, 20
Yeah.
maximum or something along here, or so, 20, 30 maybe. Over several years, you say.
Yeah, this
Okay, well,
one's,
renters may be an explanation
years.
too, because the water bill is an occupancy.
But, our
Occupant bill.
rebate program, it can take 120 days to get your check. But people often start phoning at 90 days saying, hey, where's my rebate check? So I'd be hard to imagine somebody just up and moving and forgetting that they've requested.
I know, it's for
A rebate.
$500. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's a chunk of money that, who knows? Anyway, Mary Claypool, I see, she's very local. I mean, I know who she is. I don't know the others. Anyway, that's a lot of information. Thanks for being complimented, Michelle, by
Thank
your
you.
boss.
Thank
That's
you.
nice.
I have a good boss, I have to say that. I'm fortunate.
Okay, so we need a motion on this action to recommend to the full board.
I recommend that the board accept the treasurer's report.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Hi,
Aye.
Aye, motion passes with 3 votes.
just one quick question. Will you think it would be right to put something in the paper? The coach saying if you got a rebate, you need to get it or.
No, I think he's done that already. Didn't we
You-
publish?
you-
Yeah, we published a list of outstanding checks.
Oh, already?
Yeah, to Monterey Weekly, we published that,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. Oh, thank you, okay.
Yeah, I even had Sarah Rubin from the Weekly call specifically about that advertising. What is this?
Yeah,
Yeah, you ended up talking to her, didn't you?
Right. I had to explain to her what we're doing, and so
Okay.
she was like, fine.
I sometimes read the legals, but not all the time. Okay, that's good with item number 2. Item number 3, report on the pension standards and accounting.
Yes, so this next item provides a report on the district's pension liability as of June 30th of 2023, which is the latest report that's available for the district's pension liabilities. It's 1 year back. So these liabilities are measured according to the accounting standards that are stipulated by the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. And this particular standard is called GASB 68 because that standard provides the reporting standards on how to report pension liabilities. This started in 2015. And I'm just going to provide a little bit of background here. So the district has what's called pooled cost sharing multi-employer defined benefit plan. So we are sharing, so this is a pooled plan that's maintained by CalPERS. And the district has about 43 members in this plan, of which 18 are inactive or retired, and 25 are active employees. I'll pause. And then, so this is the breakdown of the employees that are in the plan. 9 are classic members and the rest are PEPRA members. This composition is very different from what you might have seen last year, because last year we were half and half classic and PEPRA, and now we are trying to, we have less of classic members. There are 3 retirees last fiscal year. So that contributed to this. And so there are 3 components to the district's pension liability. The first one's called the fiduciary net position, which is the actual amount of assets that are in the pension trust. And That's also called the market value of assets. And then the liability, which is the actuarial present value of projected benefit payments. So that's our cumulative liability. And then the difference between the two is the net pension liability. So if you look at the staff report, we have about 19.9 million in assets and about 27.5 million in total pension liabilities. It's on page 1 of the staff report. And so the difference between the two is the net pension liability. And this slide shows where we stand. We were at 7 million last year, and now we are at around 7.6 million. So we are, so there's an increase of 500,000, half a million. And the primary driver of this increase is the investment rate of return. So the investment rate of return is 5.8%. Whenever that rate drops below the discount rate, which is 6.8, our liability increases. If we were to go over that discount rate, then our liability decreases. So as you can see, what happened here in 21, the investment rate of return was 21%, and our liability went from 6 million to 3.5 million. And then there was a negative 6% rate of return. So it went up by 3.5 million. And now it's 5.8%, but it's still below the 6.8%. And so there's still a net increase in the district's pension liability. And then this next slide just provides the net rate of return every year. And then this is a 5-year average, 10-year average, 20 and 30-year average. So you can see how CalPERS has performed over the years. And CalPERS has been reducing their discount rate over the years. If you recall, they were at 7.5, then they reduced it to 7.15. Now they're at 6.8. So what they are saying is that their long-term rate of appreciation for the assets, they are reducing the projected rate of return over time. So that's where things stand.
Stay on that slide for a second.
Mhm.
You show on the right 5-year, 10-year periods.
Yeah,
These are 5-year average?
I think they call it average. They use a different word for average, but that's the compounded 5-year rate of return.
Right, okay, so that it makes sense that they would flatten it somewhat with an average,
Yeah,
flatten the changes.
I think they're trying to take out so we don't want to see the variability. We want to see a rolling average, and I think that's what the second column does. It takes out the annual variability that we see in performance.
But what's so the left column is an annual number,
Yes.
but I don't understand the difference between the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year. Is that projected into the future?
No, that's this is the last 5 years. What was the return over the 5-year period? So that was 6.1%. What was the return in the last 10 years? That was
Okay, so it's still a 10-year average.
Yeah.
From historical, and then 20 and 30. So, okay.
Right.
Wow, that's surprisingly consistent or close together. Seems to me. I mean,
Yes, when you take
once
away
you're about 10
the-
years, I can understand where there's not much change after that, but
Right.
in that 5 years, it could be more substantial.
2022, that minus 6.1, was that a big loss or?
Yeah, that's when our liability went up by 3.5 million in that one of the previous slides. Yes.
So we had to make that up.
Yeah, eventually we do need to make that up. Yes.
Well, the year before, there was a big reduction. So it was a savings, I mean, from our side.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the 2024 investment returns are out, and CalPERS is at 9.3% last year. So next year the liability should come down.
Well, I can't quite get my head around how does a 5-year average work when we get individual changes from 21 plus to a -6 just in a 2-year span. How does the 5-year average flatten that out? This is our experience compared to the state experience, right? I mean, is there a difference in?
These numbers are all coming from CalPERS. Both the columns are from CalPERS.
The whole CalPERS investment fund, right?
Whole investment fund, that's
So
right.
if you were to average the last 5 years, so the left-hand column, it's gonna be a little bit higher, like 6.4.
Oh, I see what you're doing. All right.
But the 6.1 represents an average on a compounded basis. So if you 6.1 and the next year 1.061, 1.061, you compound it a little bit so that the overall, but yeah, this is just representative of like roughly where you would have been over a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year period. But
Okay.
the calculation that's done every year is done based on that year's singular data. So that was his point, where if you're over the investment return, then your liability goes down, and if you're under, your liability goes up. And so I guess I would say, on average, the last 5 years we've been under, but the long-term averages, as they push their investment return assumption down, we've been over it, at it, or over it pretty consistently.
Yeah, so even though I acknowledge the difference between 2 years, at the same time, I acknowledge a 5 or 10-year running average, I ignored combining the two. I mean, in my own mind, what I did, I skipped over one fact I was talking about and tried to.
And do they use the average for any purpose?
I think the reason they show this average, because this was from a public document, is they want to justify why they are decreasing their discount rate.
No, yeah.
And so that average is going down, and that's like, because when they decrease the discount rate, that also increases the liability. So it's to different audiences. If the audience is saying, hey, why is CalPERS reducing the discount rate? Look at the second column. And then why did your liability go up and down? That's the first column on an annual basis.
Not to poke fun at ourselves, but shouldn't we all be more expert on this? Don't you have a CalPERS pension? You have one through San Mateo County. You have one through fire department.
Seaside, city of Seaside.
You guys should be giving the lecture on how this stuff works.
Yeah, we get too comfortable not having to think about it.
No.
It's different looking at it from an employer side versus an employee side, like very different hats. So this slide just shows what the district has done so far to address the unfunded pension obligations, and our primary tool has been to set aside reserve funds, and so far we are at 600,000 in terms of the reserve funds. And we will be setting aside an additional 100,000, or in our original budget, we plan to set aside an additional 100,000 towards the pension reserve. And
does the accumulation of that, where does that show up when we get just a financial report on the district?
In the reserve chart or page, and it will be separately identified as a OPEB and
pension,
CalPERS, but pension, but they're still discretionary. So we haven't set up a trust. We haven't set up a third-party account. It's revocable if you needed to.
But it is earmarked, and so it's accounted for as a
Yeah.
set aside, but it's not. I mean, this is like a lot of things, it's not guaranteed.
Right.
But the plan is to have the money available for that purpose. So that was my other question, Dave, is what would be the conditions that would cause you to want to make it a trust fund or more specific?
You want to start with that one?
Yeah, could you repeat that?
So the 600,000.
Yeah.
What would be the conditions that you would have to see in order to recommend it become an appropriation.
An appropriation towards the pension payments?
Pension, yeah, liability.
Yeah, or set up a trust fund
Or,
or,
yeah,
yeah.
some format of legal, stabilizing it somehow. I don't know what the right word is, committing it.
Yeah.
Are you talking about what's on page 21?
We,
The,
yeah, so I think I understand your question. Under what circumstances would we commit the 600,000 and make a payment towards our pension liability? And at this point, my understanding is that we are using this as a stabilizing mechanism. So in a budget year, if for some reason we don't have enough to pay towards our unfunded pension liability, then we could use a portion or all of this reserve towards that payment. It's a pretty small amount if you look at the total liability, so it could only be used for a budget year. If the intent is to reduce the total liability, then there are other mechanisms that could be employed. But we understand that there are the litigation related expenses that are also that the district has to account for. But the Section 115 trust is one of those mechanisms where if we were to put these funds there, then those funds would grow at the market rate of return, which is like 7 or 8% instead of the 2 or 3% that we get in our investment portfolio. And so that 600 could become a bigger amount in 5-10 years. And then we could use that Section 115 trust to actually make a bigger dent in our liability, but that's a bigger
so
conversation.
that type of trust would only allow that the proceeds be used for pension liability?
Right,
Oh.
yes, if the money is in the trust, then it's, yeah, we can't take it out and put it to other use. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we haven't done that yet.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a couple of different reasons, but that's a really good start. On the OPEB side, which is the post-retirement, we haven't had that many retirees previously. Now we're starting to, so we'll need to kind of relook at that. But on the pension side, you may have seen that earlier chart, we fluctuated by 2 million in one year and 3 million in the other year. And so the board policy had always been, as long as the overall liability was small relative to our reserves, then we can take that variability. And so we're at the high 3s, low 4s. Obviously it kicked up, we're in the 7s now, 7 million. But we were still willing to take that risk because of that interplay between the investment return assumption and the earning actual assumption. But there are public agencies that, in addition to creating trusts, have done what we call sidecar financings. And they've said, wow, our pension obligation is getting big. Let's go do a borrowing. Typically in the taxable market, you can't do tax exempt debt, but they do a borrowing and they put that money in either a designated account or a trust or whatever to pay down the liability so that then that variability or fluctuation is on a smaller number. But you never want to do 100% of your pension liability because the next year can come along and the change in interest rates could mean that you're now positive where you were negative the year before if you paid it all off. But City of Carmel has done that kind of financing probably within the last 10 years. I know that Monterey One Water did it once, probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. So it does happen. Orange County, which had its own or has its own pension program, did a huge funding back about 20 years ago where they borrowed, because then you're repaying it over 30 years, but you kind of refinance the current liability. So there's different approaches, but we're not nervous enough about the numbers. So
Well,
So has it benefited those agencies that have done it? Do you know?
did they benefit?
Did they, is
Yeah.
it turned out to be?
Yeah, I don't know. Have you had any, did either MST or anybody try to fund? Yeah.
No.
When you finance, the sidecar financing, you're also playing the same kind of game, because if you're in a marketplace where you could do 4% interest rates, and then we're in a period of time where actual earnings rates on investments are super high, it can go a different way,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so those are called pension obligation bonds, and some cities and counties have looked at that. It's a common mechanism in a low interest rate environment. So you are basically paying off a 6.8% liability with a 2% debt. You take on debt at 2%, pay off the 6.8% liability, and you make, like not a profit, but your liability goes down because you're borrowing at 2%. But now, right now, the interest rates are pretty high, so not a lot of cities and counties are doing it, but it will skype up. Like during the COVID years, a lot of cities did that. And that when all those funds go into the stock market seems to, outperform too, but that's a separate conversation.
Well,
So,
and related for me is, if we succeed in taking over Cal-Am, would the employees have an interest, existing employees have an interest in us doing something about this so that it's protected from helping to finance Cal-Am's staff or something or other, or transition costs or whatever that might be? I know it's not a lot of money yet, but I mean.
No, it's kind of a two-part question. Protecting monies that we have from getting sucked into the cost, there might be concerns over that. Our bigger concern is marrying two organizations, one that's built primarily now on 401k and private retirement options, and one that's built on CalPERS. And the fact that we do pay Medicare, but we don't pay FICA, and they're paying FICA, and on top of that, they're paying into their 401k. Some have matching. Some of the legacy employees have an old Cal-Am retirement program. So at some point, we're more interested in looking at all these things and just making kind of a level playing field between employees coming in. But I think we'll end up, because you have to vest for 5 years to collect PERS. You'll have certain folks who are far enough along in their careers at Cal-Am who'll say, well, I'm not sticking around 5 years to get vested. But none of those actions, I think, are going to claw away at the monies that we have. The more likely is, and he's mentioned, the potential liability of losing the bench trial. And I think this is pretty low probability. If you were to change your mind based on the valuation trial, then we'd be on the hook for legal expenses. And through time, what we've always said is that there are needs out there that are beyond just the revenues of the district. So exposure to legal expenses, this pension liability, the OPEB liability. And so we wouldn't want to get to, in my mind, I wouldn't like to see us around the 3 or 4 million in reserves mark. I like it. And I may have mentioned this the other day, about 12 million during our call. Right now, given the size of the organization and the number of people, that's kind of the red line. Don't go below, 12.
12.
And I forget what you said.
Where are we
Our
now?
current position is it's pretty high right now.
yeah.
But some of that is going to have to get spent during the year. But so, we wouldn't want to pay off 6.8 million in water supply charge, followed by funding up, half of our pension liability. That's another 3.5 million. And then pretty soon you're looking at no wiggle room.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And the
Time
pension
is-
one is the easiest one to kick the can down the road until it starts looking really big. It's more problematic for cities and counties that don't control their revenue stream than it is for water, wastewater, and garbage utilities that can raise rates and charges. So in some respects, we could come back with another Prop 218 and raise a new fee to kind of keep in step with our liabilities, but
Yeah.
Total cost of service, yeah.
yeah,
Now, of course, if we have 80 more employees in the CalPERS system, we'll do a whole new relook.
yep,
Well, it'd be a big thought because going back to what we were talking about, the windfall, a lot of people over there in Cal paid into Social
Yeah.
Security and got it up there. I don't think they wanna spend 5 years in PERS and think about losing that unless they change the rules, that FICA. Because if they come over here right now, they'll lose their FICA if they apply for it.
Yeah,
You
of
know where
course.
I'm coming from? The Social Security windfall.
Would they lose it or just have to wait longer in order to?
there's a formula.
Is the form, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the gist of it is that the formula never leaves you worse off than you would have been otherwise. But it diminishes what you would have gotten. So like, to your point, you vest here and then instead of getting 100% of what you thought you were going to get on Social Security, you're now going to get a lesser amount. But the formula is graded based on the first dollars that you receive, the second set of dollars that you receive, and the third. So it's on the margin. So if you haven't been in public service very long, it's not as big a haircut than it is if you've been in public service very long. But I've heard a couple of folks here say, no, I think I'll go get a job for 2.5 years just so I can get back into Social Security.
If we succeed at the various trials and we go ahead, would the actuarial study be by individual or would it be by a general estimate?
Well, so I think we're going to try to do it in 2 steps. Step number 1 is we've got a copy of the overall union agreement, but we don't know the individual situations. So we want to come up with kind of a generalized conclusion about how you move people over with minimal impact. So I'll be coming to you with a request for funds. I just got a quote from so you may recall we had a utility consultant early on. They've stayed as part of the team, but they're no longer under contract. So we're trying to get Craig Close under contract. He just gave me a quote. It's like, if we do everything that we sort of need to do in the bench trial, it's close to $900,000. But we actually need a consulting engineer to do real work. And I'm currently in discussions, but I don't have a quote on them. We've got we've talked about getting a shadow rating with the credit rating agencies. Don't have a quote on that. And we've got a couple of names of HR consultants who would do this kind of work. And I don't have a quote on that, but trying to go into the bench trial and saying, oh yeah, we've thought through everything. It's going to be another expensive list.
Yeah.
Just to keep us on track, I think you're kind of shifting into item 5, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, so we can, there's nothing more. This was just a report to receive the pension
Just the report.
report and nothing else. And
Well, we've gotten beyond the agenda
Yes.
listing for sure.
That's a polite way of reminding us.
No, that's not, no, I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And then it's easy to go off.
Except it happens almost every time because whenever you look at your liability and you say, well, what's my safety net? What's my nest egg that could cover this? It's a natural progression.
Yeah, because reserves and so on are what if.
Yep.
Mhm.
You know, you have to look ahead to the future to what we may need, and if scenario A and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, what are the competing needs?
Yeah, reserves are a risk management tool for us. It's like an insurance coverage, and the question is it big enough to cover the risk that we have there? And that's a long-term discussion.
Okay, we kind of expanded the discussion on item 3, but do we need an action? Do we need a committee action to receive it? Okay, so it's just automatic that we're hearing it first and we're going to hear it again when it's on the agenda. Okay, enough of that. Let's go to number 4. Did we have any questions on the contract listing of the 25K and up by the committee? No, that's just a report as well. And the item 5 is again status report on the financing. The current tracking of expenses related to public ownership. Any comments or questions from anyone on the committee? Okay.
So, item 5, you're gonna ask for monies for this, this coming meeting or next meeting or
Probably the November meeting,
the November meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
because I don't have enough info yet on the consulting engineers. I want to look at them kind of together. That's if we get one that is even qualified. I think I've told you, we've had issues with large national firms now that it's a real lawsuit saying they don't want to work with us because they don't want to offend the investor-owned utility. Yeah.
No, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. So we lost our investment banker because their corporate finance people wanted to do business with American Water Works. That's kind of okay because we're not ready to finance anything yet. But we lost our engineering firm, Jacobs, and we liked them because they had acquired a large operations firm called OMI. And that means internally to the firm, they had certified maintenance specialists, certified water treatment specialists, certified water quality people. And so now that we're in the lawsuit and we've got the opportunity for discovery, we get to go visit the facilities. So you're never going to get permission to dig pipe out of the ground, but we get to see wellheads and tanks and things like that. And so the idea is you bring in a team and they do a condition assessment and identify deficiencies. They review the documents received in discovery and try to see, for example, oh, you're not compliant with American Water Works Association standard X or standard Y. And that's what Jacobs was going to do for us after their 2.5-year hiatus from when they wrote the operations plan, third party contract operations plan. And then once this became real, they were like, no, we want to chase pipes and pump business that happens every year in that industry. Your little project's a one-off transaction. Corolla, same thing. And so now we're trying to find smaller firms that can do the work, can present as an expert, but don't have a conflict. And I've got feelers out to 4 that we're talking to this week and next. So we'll see. But
those type of contractors are probably going to be relatively local, I would imagine.
well, so as surprise and luck might have it, EKI, which does work for Marina Coast Water District, has a fairly sizable water practice, and they've done some small scale condition assessment. But generally speaking, they probably don't have a conflict with CalAm because of the work they're doing for Marina Coast. So they're looking at the scope of services right now. We've got a couple other firms that are looking at the scope of services.
Okay, we'll catch up with that.
Yeah.
I appreciate
But
it.
yeah, all these big tickets probably back in November. Now, before we get into the agenda, there's one item you're going to see on the agenda that didn't come through here for $37,000. And I'll explain that when we get in here, but it wasn't ready for today's meeting, so it'll be the full board.
Okay, well, let's proceed to the last item on the agenda, which is review.
Yeah, so Sarah just
agenda.
handed out an updated, thank you, Sarah. I want to highlight just a couple of them. The item 6, other updates. We will be reporting out that we've successfully secured the 2023 Government Finance Officers Association
Oh, good.
Certificate of Excellence. So that's done.
Great.
We've got a seminar coming up, I think the day after the board meeting, that's oversubscribed. So that's a good thing. And then in there also will be the update on pure water expansion. Item 9, which is an action item. We investigated 4 what appeared to be anomalies from the salary survey that the board adopted in July. Turns out further research, 2 of them are not anomalies. We were questioning whether we overreached on the office specialist positions and whether we underreached on the conservation technician position. Both of them came back that no, they're about right where they should have been. The other thing that happened is we moved some of the staff positions around, and then when we sat back and looked at it and adopted everything, I've got 2 line staff positions that were at the same or higher rate than our division managers. And our division managers manage anywhere from 4 to 6 people plus their own workload. So that you don't normally want to have. So I've got a staff note that you'll see that just shows what those 2 staff positions and 4 management positions are and where they lie. And I think we can tweak 2 management positions to get them to where they should be. So that's correcting an inequity. And then the brand new meter program coordinator, when the union did the salary survey, came up with 1 comparable position. And because it was a new position recently accepted, we didn't challenge it. But then when we looked at it, we found 5 comparable positions. And it seemed to indicate a bump of maybe 2 salary ranges. So that's what'll be the recommendation, is just to clean up some of these
And
things.
what is that position again?
That's the person that goes out and reads the well meters, pulls in that well meter data, puts together the annual well report, those kinds of things.
Thank you. Okay.
So that's what item 9 is.
So when you clean that up, you're gonna have a cost?
Yeah.
What additional cost is
Yeah,
gonna cost us?
the
or
staff
whatever?
note that I gave Sarah, I didn't have a cost yet, but there's, it'll be.
Okay.
The hard part is fully loaded with benefits is, it's kind of a.
Okay, and union okay with that? Do you gotta run it through them or?
No, actually, these are things that under the memorandum of understanding, I actually have the authority. I mean, these count as, a promotion. It's not a new job description, but I just didn't want to take the authority without having you see it, because you
Good.
did see the previous salary survey and that was a big body of effort.
So you haven't talked with the union about this?
No, I don't think the union will complain, because they'll end up having 3 members get slight bumps. I suspect we'll have 1 or 2 employees who will go, that's not fair. I didn't get my thing.
Well, mine was saying, at least inform them so they can whine and rejoice or whatever, so.
Item 10 is the Water Demand Committee's discussion about
Enforcing the
the potential amnesty, I think is the term we're using.
Good.
Yeah. Item 11 is for the AGM. We had an internal discussion whether we wanted to use RGS, who does a lot of our recruitment, and whether or not there were better firms, and there are better firms for executive search. So we went out and got 3 quotes, and the range was 28,000 to 36,750, which is not budgeted and exceeds the limit. So I'm bringing that to you for authorization.
Did you find a firm that seems?
Yeah,
At least
so,
one?
yeah, Simona and I need to discuss, but I think, so we have one of the firms is who Monterey One Water used for some recent searches. They're not my favorite. The other two, one's Bob Murray and Associates, who's pretty well known in the public sector. And the other is Ralph Anderson, which is also pretty well known in the public sector. So it'll probably be one of those two. But we'll need to sit down with Michelle, Simona, and I and just pick the one that we think is going to be most effective.
Progress, that's good.
Item 12 is just a report back. You remember there was a letter in the board packet about rebates
Yes.
or credits, and that's just a report. Item 13 is a summary of our September 12th meeting and next steps on water allocation. I have not gone to any city councils or boards, but my first one is the day after. The Board of Supervisors is on the 22nd. And then I've got every city and the airport board set up through before our December board meeting. And this is where we present a simplified version, or let's just say less explanation behind a lot of the slides of what the allocation process is and what our proposal is. And I think I have a meeting with Delray Oaks where we both share a common concern that because they're so small and the amount of allocation came in so small, that it's hard to hold them to the same standard of here, we're just going to give you a third of your need because a third is a really small number on a small amount.
Mhm.
So that one may change, but otherwise it's, for those of you who did sit in or listen to that lengthy meeting, it's the same proposal as before.
So under your update here on 13, you're going to give your presentation that you're going to give to the cities?
Yep. It's
Okay, good. It is.
virtually identical. And the staff note, apart from one or two changes in sentences, is what the cities are going to write whatever they want to write, but the county asked for some help and I gave them one. And the only change they made was County Water Resources Agency diminished a statement about whether or not pure water expansion is sufficient to lift the cease and desist order.
So your first meeting is going to be with the Board of Supervisors in the last week of October?
Yeah, actually the 22nd.
22nd.
Yep.
And then do you have dates set for the cities?
I do.
Can you tell me when PG?
PG is November 20th. Delray Oaks is November 19th. Monterey looks like it's now November 5th. I'll have all these. for the
November
board.
5th. Nobody's going to be able to pay attention.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, that's.
That's interesting because I think that's the date that Hans originally said that's election day. So nope. But if they're having a council meeting, I don't know, this is the one the planner gave me. Otherwise it would have been.
They're gonna change that.
Yeah, it's likely going to be changed. And then the airport also on the 20th of November in the morning, and Seaside on the 21st. So, and Carmel was the only one that kind of got a little mamby-pamby on me, like, oh, well, let's wait for the new city council to be seated. And I said, well, look, we're writing an ordinance for December 1st reading. So if you want to wait, go ahead. But it's
Well,
not
still,
gonna
it's
make
only
a
the first
big
meeting,
difference.
so. First
Well,
reading, I
so-
mean, so.
But our goal is, and a recommendation, like in the Board of Supervisors recommendation, it's accept the report, agree with the proposed allocation, or make suggested recommendations to district staff for review. So,
Changes.
yeah, so if the city council or the Board of Supers pushes back, we'll listen, but It's kind of a, one time, get them all in, rather than
Make it comments.
missing out.
Were there any particular feedback issues when you gave the presentation to the staffs?
Yeah, there were two. And then a third one came up in discussion later. The city of Monterey felt that relying on AMBAG growth rates could be flawed if AMBAG didn't do their job. And they raised two things. One is that AMBAG hadn't included the new census data in their new population forecast. And two, the city thinks that they count job growth, certain jobs they were double counting. And in follow-up conversation, I said, well, that would just get you more water, because if your growth rate's being overcounted, I'm including a higher rate on non-residential water use. So don't worry about it. And then City of Seaside said, oh, we've got higher densities now for the downtown than perhaps what we had at AMBAG. And I'm not buying that completely, because you don't change your downtown specific plan in 18 months. And the AMBAG plan had just been approved 24 months earlier. But even if they we're not allocating 100%. It's
Right, you always have this backup option later, and
Right.
correct for errors, correct for oversight, correct for reality.
But in both cases, I gave them like a 3-week head start on if you have any concerns that you raised or, relative to our use of AMBAG growth rates, please send in correspondence by, October, whatever it was, 2 Fridays ago. And they didn't, so.
But going back, AMBAG is a official report. But I remember when we started this years ago, when Molly was here, we mentioned what is a report out there that we can use that, is an official report.
Yep.
And we came up with AMBAG. So all the cities have somebody on AMBAG. If they haven't took care of this, with me, I'm sorry.
Well, and what's interesting is,
I'm gonna just chime in, we are getting off.
Yeah, we are getting off.
Significantly,
Okay,
so,
okay.
going back to the draft agenda, the only thing I'd say is for item 7, we should probably also add a report out of the October 11th. closed session meeting as well.
yeah,
Okay,
I thought it said that.
We have the September 16th, which is when we had the closed session at the end of the meeting, but
Oh,
then we also had our special closed session October 11th.
thank you, yes.
we can take a AMBAG when we get there.
and then in the GM's report, I'm hoping to have the end of water year demand numbers so we can see where that curve ended up for the year. So should have it.
Also, item 3, today's presentation is a consent item. It looks like we already have quite a few presentations on the agenda.
And will the legal counsel report include anything on the timing of hearing
So we will have our written
the-
report, and I know that that's.
the issue of the final report, final decision, whatever that final.
We'll have that stuff included, and then we can address it during the comments. If needed.
Okay.
But yeah, no, we're obviously, because we're in the negotiations with MPTA, so we're not going to go into details on where we're going with that, but we will provide a general update.
Okay, I'm just mainly interested in
Public- In
the,
the public session.
I'm just mainly interested in the decision we're trying to get, the final decision out of the local court.
There's been no update on that, so.
I think you were projecting, I think people were generally projecting, maybe it was the other council,
Right,
expecting 30 to 40 days, and I'm just guessing we're about at the 30 or 40 day mark.
Yeah.
And we haven't
Haven't heard anything. Okay, that was just a guess
Yeah.
question. Okay.
Waiting on a lot of fronts.
I know, and
hurry up and wait.
yeah. So, okay, no more business to tend to, meeting adjourned?
Thank you, Chair.
And Michelle, I got an email from Matt Slentz on